Ata. Jataka no. Tandulanali Jataka. Do ask how much a peck of rice is worth. This was told by the master, while at Jetavana monastery, about the monk Udayi, called the dullard. At that time the Reverend Dabba, the Malian, was mancipal to the Sangha. When in the early morning Dabba was allotting the checks for rice, sometimes it was choice rice and sometimes it was an inferior quality which fell to the share of the elder monk Udayi. On days when he received the inferior quality, he used to make a commotion in the check room, by demanding, "Is Dabba the only one who knows how to give out checks? Don't we know?" One day when he was making a commotion, they handed him the check basket, saying, "Here. You give the checks out yourself today." From then on, it was Udayi who gave out the checks to the brotherhood. But, in his distribution, he could not tell the best from the inferior rice. Nor did he know what seniority was entitled to the best rice and what to the inferior. So too, when he was making out the roster, he had not an idea of the seniority of the brethren on that. Consequently, when the brethren took up their places, he made a mark on the ground or on the wall to show that one detachment stood here, and another there. Next day there were fewer brethren of one grade and more of another in the check room. Where there were fewer, the mark was too low down. Where the number was greater, it was too high up. But Udayi, quite ignorant of detachments, gave out the checks simply according to his old marks. Hence, the brethren said to him, "Friend Udayi, the mark is too high up or too low down. The best rice is for those of such and such seniority, and the inferior quality for such and such others." But he put them back with the argument, "If this mark is where it is, what are you standing here for? Why am I to trust you? It's my mark one trust." Then, the boys and novices thrust him from the check room, crying, "Friend Udayi the dullard, when you give out the checks, the brethren are docked of what they should get. You are not fit to give them out. Go away from here." On this, a great uproar arose in the check room. Hearing the noise, the master asked the elder monk Ananda, saying, "Ananda, there is a great uproar in the check room. What is the noise about?" The elder monk explained it all to the Buddha. "Ananda," said he, "this is not the only time when Udayi by his stupidity has robbed others of their profit. He did just the same thing in past times too." The elder monk asked the Lord Buddha for an explanation, and the Lord Buddha made clear what had been concealed by rebirth. Once upon a time Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares in Kasi. In those days our bodhisattva was his valuer. He used to value horses, elephants, and the like, and jewels, gold, and the like. And he used to pay over to the owners of the goods the proper price, as he fixed it. But the king was greedy and his greed suggested to him this thought: "This valuer with his style of valuing will soon exhaust all the riches in my house. I must get another valuer." Opening his window and looking out into his courtyard, he saw walking across a stupid, greedy man in whom he saw a likely candidate for the post. So the king had the man sent for, and asked him whether he could do the work. "Oh yes," said the man. "And sir, to safeguard the royal treasure, this stupid fellow was appointed valuer." After this the fool, in valuing elephants and horses and the like, used to fix a price dictated by his own fancy, neglecting their true worth. But, as he was valuer, the price was what he said and no other. At that time there arrived from the north country a horse dealer with horses. The king sent for his new valuer and asked him to value the horses. And the price he set on the whole horses was just one measure of rice, which he ordered to be paid over to the dealer, directing the horses to be led off to the stable. Away went the horse-dealer to the old valuer, to whom he told what had happened, and asked what was to be done. "Give him a bribe," said the ex-valuer, "and put this point to him. Knowing as we do that our horses are worth just a single measure of rice, we are curious to learn from you what the precise value of a measure of rice is. Could you state its value in the king's presence? If he says he can, then take him before the king. And I too will be there." Readily following the bodhisattva's advice, the horse-dealer bribed the man and put the question to him. The other, having expressed his ability to value a measure of rice, was promptly taken to the palace, where also went the bodhisattva and many other ministers. With due reverence the horse-dealer said, "Sire, I do not dispute it that the price of horses is a single measure of rice. But I would ask your majesty to question your valuer as to the value of that measure of rice." Ignorant of what had passed, the king said to the fellow valuer, "What are horses worth?" "A measure of rice, sire," was the reply. "Very good, my friend. If horses then are worth one measure of rice, what is that measure of rice worth?" "It is worth all Benares and its suburbs," was the fool's reply. Opening parenthesis. Thus we learn that, having first valued the horses at a measure of hill paddy to please the king, he was bribed by the horse-dealer to estimate that measure of rice at the worth of all Benares and its suburbs. And that though the walls of Benares were 12 leagues round by themselves, while the city and suburbs together were 300 leagues round, yet the fool priced all this vast city and its suburbs at a single measure of rice. Closing parenthesis. On this the ministers clapped their hands and laughed merrily. "We used to think," they said in contempt, "that the earth and the realm were beyond price. But now we learn that the kingdom of Benares together with its king is only worth a single measure of rice. What talents the valuer has! How has he retained his post so long? But truly the valuer suits our king admirably." Then the bodhisattva repeated this stanza. "Do ask how much a peck of rice is worth. Why, all Benares, both within and out. Yet, strange to tell, 500 horses too are worth precisely this same peck of rice." Thus put to open shame, the king sent the fool packing, and gave the bodhisattva the office again. And when his life ended, the bodhisattva passed away to fare according to his deeds. His lesson ended and the two stories told. The master made the relation linking both together, and identified the birth by saying in conclusion, Khuddhaka the dullard was the stupid rustic valuer of those days, and I myself the wise valuer. JATAKA no. Devoured JATAKA. Those only, godlike, are called. This story was told by the Lord Buddha while at Jetavana monastery, about a wealthy brother. Tradition tells us that, on the death of his wife, an assistant of a high official of Shravasti city joined the brotherhood. When he was joining, he caused to be built for himself a chamber to live in, a room for the fire, and a storeroom. And not till he had stocked his storeroom with ghee, rice, and the like, did he finally join. Even after he had become a monk, he used to send for his servants and make them cook him what he liked to eat. He was richly provided with the items, having an entire change of clothing for night and another for day. And he lived aloof on the outskirts of the monastery. One day when he had taken out his cloths and bedding and had spread them out to dry in his chamber, a number of brethren from the country, who were on a pilgrimage from monastery to monastery, came in their journeying to his cell and found all these belongings. "Whose are these?" they asked. "Mine, sirs," he replied. "What, sir?" they cried. "This upper cloth and that as well. This under cloth as well as that." And that bedding too, is it all yours? Yes, nobody's but mine. Sir, said they, the Lord Buddha has only approved 3 cloths. And yet, though the Buddha, to whose teaching you have devoted yourself, is so simple in his wants, you for what have amassed all this stock of items? Come, we must take you before the Lord of Wisdom. And, so saying, they went off with him to the master. Becoming aware of their presence, the master said, For what reason, monks, that you have brought the monk against his will? Sir, this monk is well off and has quite a stock of items. Is it true, brother, as they say, that you are so well off? Yes, Lord Buddha. But why, monk, have you amassed these belongings? Do not I praise the virtues of wanting little, contentment, and solitude, and determined resolve? Angered by the master's words, he cried, Then I'll go about like this. And, throwing off his outer clothing, he stood in their midst clad only in his waistcloth. Then, as a moral support to him, the master said, Was it not you, monk, who in past days were a seeker after the shamefacedness that fears to sin, and even when you were a water Yakkha lived for 12 years seeking after that shamefacedness? How then comes it that, after vowing to follow the great path of the Buddha, you have thrown off your outer robes and stand here without shame? At the master's word, his sense of shame was restored. He wore his robes again, and, saluting the master, seated himself at the side. The brethren having asked the Lord Buddha to explain to them the matter he had mentioned, the Lord Buddha made clear what had been concealed from them by rebirth. Once upon a time Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares in Kasi. The bodhisattva, having come to birth in those days as the king's son by the queen, was duly named Prince Mahimsasa. By the time he could run about, a second son was born to the king, and the name they gave this child was Prince Moon. But by the time he could run about, the bodhisattva's mother died. Then the king took another queen, who was his joy and delight. And their love was crowned with the birth of yet another prince, whom they named Prince Sun. In his joy at the birth of the boy, the king promised to grant her any boon she might ask on the child's behalf. But the queen treasured up the promise to be fulfilled at her own good time hereafter. Later, when her son had grown up, she said to the king, Sire, when my boy was born, you granted me a boon to ask for him. Let him be king. No, said the king. 2 sons have I, radiant as flaming fires. I cannot give the kingdom to your son. But when he saw that, undaunted by this refusal, the queen kept tormenting him time after time. To grant her request, the king, fearing otherwise the woman should plot evil against his sons, sent for them and said, My children, when Prince Sun was born, I granted a boon. And now his mother wants the kingdom for him. I have no wish to give him the kingdom. But women are naturally wicked, and she will be plotting evil against you. You had better retire to the forest, to return at my death to rule in the city which belongs by right to our house. So saying, with tears and sobs, the king kissed his 2 sons on the head and sent him away. As the princes were leaving the palace after their farewell to their father, who should see them but Prince Sun himself, who was playing in the courtyard. And no sooner did he learn what was the matter than he made up his mind to go with his brothers. So he too went off in their company. The 3 came to the region of the Himalayas. And here the bodhisattva, who had turned aside from the road and was sitting at the foot of a tree, said to Prince Sun, Run down to the pool over there, son dear. Drink and bathe there. And then bring us too some water back in a lotus leaf. Opening parenthesis. Now that pool had been delivered over to a certain water Yakkha by Vesavana, who said to him, "With the exception of such as know what is truly godlike, all that go down into this pool are yours to devour. Over those that do not enter the waters, you have no power granted to you." And from then on the water Yakkha used to ask all who went down into the pool what was truly godlike, devouring everyone who did not know. Closing parenthesis. Now it was into this pool that Prince Sun went down, quite unsuspiciously, with the result that he was seized by the water Yakkha, who said to him, "Do you know what is truly godlike?" "Oh yes," said he. "The sun and moon." "You don't know," said the monster, and hauling the prince down into the depths of the water, imprisoned him there in his own dwelling. Finding that his brother was a long time gone, the bodhisattva sent Prince Moon. He too was seized by the water Yakkha and asked whether he knew what was truly godlike. "Oh yes, I know," said he. "The 4 quarters of heaven are." "You don't know," said the water Yakkha as he hauled this second victim off to the same prison house. Finding that this second brother too waited long, the bodhisattva felt sure that something had happened to them. So away he went after them and tracked their footsteps down into the water. Realizing at once that the pool must be the domain of a water Yakkha, he secured his sword, and took his bow in his hand, and waited. Now when the Yakkha found that the bodhisattva had no intention of entering the water, he assumed the shape of a forester, and in this guise addressed the bodhisattva thus: "You're tired with your journey, mate. Why don't you go in and have a bathe and a drink, and decorate yourself with lotuses? You would travel on comfortably afterwards." Recognizing him at once for a Yakkha, the bodhisattva said, "It is you who have seized my brothers." "Yes, it was the reply. "Why?" "Because all who go down into this pool belong to me." "What? All?" "Not those who know what is truly godlike. All other than these are mine." "And do you want to know the godlike?" "I do. If this be so, I will tell you what is truly godlike." "Do so, and I will listen." "I should like to begin," said the bodhisattva, "but I am travel-stained with my journey." Then the water Yakkha bathed the bodhisattva, and gave him food to eat and water to drink, showered him with flowers, sprinkled him with scents, and laid out a couch for him in the midst of a gorgeous pavilion. Seating himself on this couch, and making the water Yakkha sit at his feet, the bodhisattva said, "Listen then and you shall hear what the truly godlike is." And he repeated this stanza. Those only, godlike, are called, who desist from sin. The white-souled tranquil votaries of good. And when the Yakkha heard this, he was pleased, and said to the bodhisattva, "Man of wisdom, I am pleased with you, and give you up one of your brothers. Which shall I bring?" "The youngest." "Man of wisdom, though you know so well what the truly godlike is, you don't act on your knowledge." "How so?" "Why, you take the younger in preference to the elder, without regard to his seniority." "Yakkha, I not only know but practice the godlike. It was on this boy's account that we searched refuge in the forest. It was for him that his mother asked the kingdom from our father, and our father, refusing to fulfill her demand, consented to our flight to the refuge of the forest. With us came this boy, nor ever thought of turning back again. Not a soul would believe me if I were to give out that he had been devoured by a Yakkha in the forest. And it is the fear of wrong that impels me to demand him at your hands." "Excellent! Excellent! O man of wisdom," cried the Yakkha in approval. "You not only know but practice the godlike." And in token of his happiness and approval, he brought the 2 brothers and gave them both to the bodhisattva. Then said the latter to the water Yakkha, Friend, it is in consequence of your own evil deeds in times past that you have now been born a Yakkha surviving on the flesh and blood of other living creatures. And in this present birth too you are continuing to do evil. This evil conduct will forever bar you from escaping rebirth in hell and the other evil states. For this reason, from this time on renounce evil and live virtuously. Having worked the Yakkha's conversion, the bodhisattva continued to dwell at that spot under his protection, until one day he read in the stars that his father was dead. Then taking the water Yakkha with him, he returned to Benares and took possession of the kingdom, making Prince Moon his viceroy and Prince Sun his chief general. For the water Yakkha he made a home in a pleasant spot and took measures to ensure his being provided with the choicest garlands, flowers, and food. He himself ruled in righteousness until he passed away to fare according to his deeds. His lesson ended, the master preached the truths, at the close of which that brother won the fruit of the first path. And the all-knowing Buddha, having told the two stories, made the relation linking the two together, and identified the birth, by saying, the well-to-do brother was the water Yakkha of those days. Ananda was Prince Sun, Sariputra Prince Moon, and I myself the eldest brother, Prince Mahimsasa.